Hi, welcome to America at its Best. My name is Rebecca Painter, and I'm your host. I'm so glad you're able to join us and hear about the good news that you're making possible through your support of SPN and this network. And we have some great news to share with you today. Do you know that just 30 days into the new year, we already saw two big wins for education reform in Iowa and in Utah. This is such a big deal. A few years ago, it felt like education wins were stagnant, and now they're rolling in all over the place. This is thanks to you. And this is happening at a time when the federal government is just letting us down every time we turn around. But good things are happening in the states despite all of that. It's very exciting. I'm delighted to bring Connor Boyack to you today, the CEO of Libertas in Utah, and also our very own Jane McEnaney, who is in charge of all of SPN's strategy and programming around education. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, so glad you're here.
Happy to be here.
So glad you guys are here. Now, Connor, tell us about what happened in Utah, and just start with, tell us about the Utah Fits All Scholarship and how it's really helping families in Utah.
So we just got this bill passed with a referendum-proof majority in Utah and a veto-proof majority as well. It's a universal education savings account or spending account that provides families up to $8,000 per child if they want to withdraw their child from the government school and then send them either to private school, homeschool, a micro school, whatever they want to do in the education realm. They now have the funding potential to do so. This program is currently funded for 5,000 kids. That's where our starting point is. So now our goal is to really get oversubscription so that there's such overwhelming demand that we can come back to the legislature and say, hey, this needs to be funded even more to help even more, many more thousands of kids.
That's great. $8,000. And now that's a lot of money that could pay for a lot of schooling. This didn't happen overnight. You guys have been in this game a while. You didn't just show up at the State House, which, by the way, is where you are today, right? You didn't just show up a few weeks ago and get in the game. How long have you been at this?
That's right. I am here in my office, away from my office today up here at the Capitol. And we've been working on this particular policy for probably 6 years. Utah's story is a bit unique. We were a leader in education reform 15 years ago when we passed, I believe, the first, if not one of the very first voucher bills in 2007. The teachers union, the NEA, recognizing that they saw this as a threat, spent $2 million investing in a referendum effort in Utah. They were successful. Libertas didn't exist at the time. There wasn't really a very strong coalition or donors funding a project to push back on the teachers union. So they prevailed. And ever since then, in 2007, when they overturned the voucher law, which, by the way, was at the time only going to give kids up to $3,000 per student. And here we are now at $8,000. But for 15 years, the legislature's been scared of its own shadow, assuming that it's the will of the people, that we don't have school choice. So when we got a meeting together about 5 or 6 years ago with all of the people involved in that voucher fight, it was a very pessimistic doom and gloom meeting. They're like, oh, you'll never get school choice in Utah. Oh, it's never going to happen. And so we decided to plow forward anyways, started building a coalition of other organizations who could help us. It's taken us quite a while, but here we are now. Not only did we prevail, but enough of a super majority so that there can't be a referendum on this like there was 15 years ago, which is particularly exciting.
So when you were building up this coalition of organizations, I heard you had one group who seemed like they would be an ally, but they were tough to get on board, the homeschoolers. Tell us about that.
Well, my wife and I have homeschooled our kids forever. I am very tight into the homeschool community. I speak at homeschool events. I write the Tuttle Twins books for homeschoolers and everyone else. So this is my tribe, is what I'm getting at. And I know what the sentiment is. The homeschool community is split on school choice. Half of them eagerly embrace it and are excited to have the financial help, because it's like, why am I paying taxes for other kids to go to school? And then only with whatever money is left over, I then can pay for my own kids' education. So there's a lot of homeschoolers who support getting their tax money back, in a sense, and being able to utilize it for their kids. However, homeschoolers by their nature are a fiercely independent lot, and they jealously guard the freedom that we've had since the 80s. Homeschooling used to be banned basically everywhere in America. It was only in the 80s when things started to free up. So here in Utah, for example, years ago, we changed the homeschooling law to remove any regulations. There's no testing, there's no reporting, there's literally nothing. You can do whatever you want. And so homeschoolers jealously guard that. And they are worried that if they start accepting money from the state, that strings will be attached and regulations will follow. It's a concern that, though speculative, it's legitimate. And so we went to great lengths in this bill to put a whole bunch of kind of tighten screws in the policy to make sure that it would never get to that point, to try and address and resolve those concerns. I think we did that pretty well. And I think now Utah's is a model that other states can replicate because they're going to hear from the same communities with the same concerns. And so we've been able to innovate in that way to try and make this a little bit more palatable.
Oh, that's outstanding. And the other unique thing about this bill that caught my attention was teacher pay. It seemed like that was a negotiating tool that was used to make this thing happen. Tell us more about that.
So the state right now in Utah is flush with cash as a result of the past few years.
As are all the states, it seems.
Really well. Yeah, plus with all the CARES Act money and everything else that they've been showered with money. So the proposal was, can we basically tamp down the opposition from the teachers union by combining the universal ESA with a pay increase for teachers so that we can make some of them happy. They're very underpaid as a whole. Granted, I think we need more market competition in compensation so that the good teachers can make a lot more and the poor teachers don't, but that's a topic for another day. The point is that teachers as a whole are generally receive low pay. And so there was an appetite by the legislature to increase teacher pay. But we said, rather than these being parallel tracks, let's combine the two so that fewer teachers are going to go attack the school choice bill. And so that we can message that this combined bill is about helping the very beneficiaries for which the system purportedly exists. And that is the students themselves and their teachers. We have so much administrative bloat in the government schools in the past few decades. And so if you simply fund the system, that money is just going to get gobbled up by 1,000 people. By funding teachers directly, by increasing their pay directly, and by funding students directly, we're able to shift the conversation back to the beneficiaries, the intended beneficiaries, and then try and starve or at least address the administrative bloat on top that we have.
And to be clear, the teacher pay was a separate line item from the ESA, so one can continue to grow without the other if needed.
That's correct. The teacher's pay was a one-time thing. By now setting up this program, this what in our case is called the Utah Fits All scholarship, contrasting against the government schools where one size fits all. Now we say that Utah Fits All, we're going to accommodate people with different learning styles. So it's the Utah Fits All scholarship. By creating the infrastructure and the program in law, in future years, the legislature can just start diverting more money from the government schools over to the scholarship. We don't need to do anything else because the program already exists. We can just increase the money over time. So that's our goal, get so many people signing up for this that it becomes an easy ask coming to the legislature to say, we have more demand than we can fulfill. Can we increase the funding? And we think that'll be a fairly easy conversation to have.
Okay. You mentioned the teachers unions, and I think many of our viewers watching know that in the years since the March-Janus Supreme Court ruling came down, this network has done a tremendous amount of work to help union members know their rights in case they choose not to be a part of a union. I hear you guys had a rally around the same time the teachers union had a rally. Were your numbers, were you just crushed? Was it one of those situations where the teachers union had thousands of people and you just had, a handful? Tell us what that looked like. Thankfully,
it was the inverse of that. The teachers held their press conference and rally. They had roughly about 200 people there. I was present. It was a rather intimate event. Full of traditional talking points that public dollars should be for public schools and so forth. And it was about 200 people. When we gathered the community and the people going to private schools and the homeschoolers and everybody else, we filled the Capitol with about 2,000 people. Our team, our whole coalition, 10x what the teachers union did. I think especially teachers unions have never been at a weaker point, both because of COVID and the transformative changes happening in the system itself. Many teachers leaving, saying, I can go start my own little micro school and not have to deal with bureaucracy and get paid more and just teach, which is what I signed up for. So a lot of teachers are leaving the system. And also, as we've seen with polling, the attitudes of parents have hugely shifted in favor of alternatives to government schools post-pandemic. This is a big silver lining of the very dark cloud of COVID, that so many people have changed their views. And we're seeing that in how many people have showed up. They're hungry for it. They're eager for it. They recognize that the schools are filled with problems. They want to do right by their kids, and they need solutions. They need funding. And so that's what this bill now provides.
That's incredible. So talk to me about this. This is my last question for you, Connor. You've got 5,000 families now poised to have a choice to go to a different school or system of education. So often there's not a supply side. Where can they go? And you're right, there is a trend where we're seeing more and more schools popped up, but what are you doing about the supply side?
So I don't really buy into the idea that if you build it, they will come. I have passed too many laws up here at the Capitol over our 11, 12 years of existence, where we do this innovative program, we do this thing, and then we look around and no one knows about it. No one signs up for it. No one utilizes it. So yes, we have a paper success right now. We got the law changed. Awesome. What we now need is an actual success. We need to actualize what we've done here. We need to get families into the program. And to that end, we need more infrastructure. We need more private schools. We need more micro schools. And Utah does not have a very large educational alternative infrastructure. And so the hope and the goal is that now that there's funding potential, there's going to be a lot more education entrepreneurs who are like, oh, hey, if I can start my own little mini private school, I could make that work. I could have my kids go there. I could spend all day with my kids, you know, and make this financially viable. So with SPN's help, in particular, Carrie McDonald, for months, we have been coordinating and communicating with education entrepreneurs in our community to make them aware of what's going on, what this opportunity is, to provide them support. We're now going to be spinning off an organization dedicated to helping these types of entrepreneurs get their schools or programs up and running. Because while on the one side, we're pushing a lot of kids, hopefully, to sign up for these scholarships, on the other side, we're going to try and make sure that there's enough micro schools and private schools to satisfy the demand. Otherwise, we're going to have more kids, maybe they'll just homeschool, and that's fine. But we certainly want to make sure that there's a lot of micro schools. And so we're working on legislation to try and even enable that further.
Thanks, Connor. Jane, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you have Carrie McDonald doing for the rest of the network? Because I think she's working in some other states on this project as well.
She is working right now in 10 different states on this entrepreneurship and innovation project to really meet the demand needs of these expanded programs across the country. And I just have to share a bit of good news from just last week. A bill to recognize micro schools and remove regulatory barriers in Utah passed committee by a pretty wide margin. I think it was a 5-1 vote. And the Libertas Institute was really instrumental in pushing that bill forward. So these are the kind of things that are happening at state houses in response to some of the work that Carrie and other entrepreneurs in education are doing. This work to reduce the regulatory barriers, address zoning and occupancy restrictions, so that these aspiring founders or providers are not held up by meeting these hurdles that are not only frustrating but costly, and in a lot of cases can prevent them from expanding access for students.
That's fantastic. We'll all be keeping an eye on her important work, because the supply side is so critical right now that we're finally getting the kind of choice wins that we need to make a difference. Another question for you, Jane. So much of what State Policy Network is doing with our groups all across the country, I think it's twofold. First, it's working, as I think Connor can attest to, with organizations like Libertas over the course of a number of years to make sure that they are prepared internally through their leadership and their strategy to get wins like this. The other piece is doing everything we can in the short term to help them get those wins over the finish line. Did SPN play a role in the last few weeks leading up to this, that was helpful to Connor? You could speak to that. Maybe Connor could as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had members of the education team from SPN on the ground. SPN also was able to hire some government affairs talent to work with Libertas and the coalition more broadly to build relationships with key lawmakers, work those lawmakers, get them convinced that and educated on what the bill does and what the great consequences will be for everyone in Utah. And this is really the bread and butter of how SPN partners with our affiliates in the states. This year in 2023, the education team is working with more than 20 states to spread education reforms across the country. And it's not just choice, it's also the work that Carrie's doing and expanding entrepreneurs and helping them unleash these great innovations. It's implementing wins that have already taken place in Arizona, West Virginia. Now this year, just weeks into the year, we had the big win in Utah. We also had a win in Iowa, and we're really expecting to see even more great news to come. And keeping tabs on quite a few states, and you really see the power of the network because one state passes this and so many states have followed, and they, see the encouragement that is going on and the success of states like Utah, and they say, hey, why don't we really try and do something here? So it's great to see.
Thanks, Jane. Connor, any parting words before we let you go? I think you've got a press conference in 10 minutes. We don't want to hold you up.
I'll build on that last comment. SPN has been critical in their support for our work. This is work that requires multi-year investment. So often, as the founder of Libertas from over a decade ago now, right? It's so easy to chase those short-term wins that don't require a lot of investment, that don't require a lot of time. But doing something big like this is the result of multiple years, heads down, building out coalitions, building out a lot of creative collateral, having hundreds of meetings with people. And so SPN was part of this coalition. We had AFP and Yes Every Kid, Ed Choice and Excel in Ed, American Federation for Children, Institute for Justice, the Private Schools Association, the Catholic, this became a big coalition of people who all had, just like with the government affairs talent that SPN hired, that individual in particular has really strong relationships with a few key legislators that we needed him to go talk to because we don't have maybe as strong of a relationship. When you compound that by having a dozen organizations, whether they hire their own government affairs talent for local representation or they're already here locally, everyone knows different people, and it's all those little conversations that are happening that build into the success that we've had. If this was Libertas alone, this would not have happened. Early on it was, and so we struggled early on because we were just trying to plow forward. The network, the coalition, this has been the key to our success. It's the traditional many hands make light work, and that's certainly true of this case. So I just want to acknowledge for your donors who are watching how helpful SPN has been to our work in this regard, both on the choice side, but also with Carrie and on the supply side, trying to help support these education entrepreneurs who want to take advantage of these new opportunities and help transform the landscape of education in America. So thank you, and the work's just getting started.
Well, Connor, you said something to me the other day about success having many fathers or mothers sometimes in this case. And you're right. And I appreciate you mentioning all of the groups involved. It's important. I think a lot of the people viewing give to a lot of those organizations. But I have to say this, and I believe this very strongly. While everybody you just mentioned had a role in this, nothing compares to a state organization and a state leader like yourself who lives in that state, who sees these lawmakers at the grocery store, who knows how the state politics works and the players and the way that these bills get through. And you've been working this for years and years and years. And that was the key to the success of this happening. And it will be the key to you expanding beyond these 5,000 families and kids. So while all of these folks, including SPN, rallying around you is critical and helpful, I think this is what makes this 50-state network so critical and important, is having this long-term in-state presence that makes it all work. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's why we're so grateful to have the partners we have on the ground in the states and our donor partners fueling the engine to make it all work. And it's a really exciting time, especially, as I said at the beginning, right now, when the federal government continues to let us down over and over and over again. The states is where it's at. Connor, you're where it's at. Those of you listening, you guys are making it all happen. And I will close with this, Connor. Thank you for this victory you've given us, because it's not going to live and die in Utah. We're bringing it to other states, rest assured. Thank you. You've done more than just education. I know the sandbox, taking regulations off of entrepreneurs who are starting businesses also didn't live and die in Utah. You're up to more than 13 states now, I think, have implemented some version of this. Connor is doing big things everywhere. And I meant to say this at the beginning. This guy, creator of Tuttle Twins, he didn't even ask me to say this, but if you're looking for a gift for your kids or your grandkids, check it out. You won't regret these books. You will be investing in the future of our country. They are awesome. So thank you, Jane. Thank you, Connor. And thank you for being with us. If you have ideas on what you would like to hear for the topic of our next show, please email me at painter@spn.org. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll be in touch to let you know what we'll be talking about next month. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.